I'd like to call to order the Schenectady City Council Committee meeting for Monday, January 6, 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. And our first committee is Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. So I would like to call the Finance Committee to order. One item on the agenda is the Schenectady Police Department temporary portable bathroom trailer. Chief, or somebody on there, or
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. We are going through a transition and update in the city police department. Currently, we are without showers or bathrooms in the basement. So we are respectfully asking the mayor designee to enter into contract with Mike's Portable. They are a local company that's currently offering us portable showers and toilets. And their rate is $5,200 per month.
Can you just tell them about the background a little bit on
There's a
that?
bit of a background, correct? So initially, Mike's, we had contacted them because they were local, and they've done a great job. We put it out to bid. We had two bidders. The winning bidder for $5,200 came from Tent South LLC. They're out of South Carolina. They came up here and ultimately experienced problems with freezing temperatures and basically just bad luck on their part. They pulled out the next day and could not honor the contract anymore. Mike's Portables really kind of give them some accolades and a shout out. Initially, their contract was for $65.60 per month, but they actually suggested that they can honor the $5,200 per month, which was the lowest bidder.
Mr. Chair, to follow up on what the lieutenant just said, this was terminated for the mutual convenience of both for us and for the vendor. They could perform, they thought they could. There was logistical issues, as the lieutenant has indicated. So we both mutually terminated the city as well as the vendor. That's on record in the city purchasing office. So my recommendation is that the resolution go forward, and it'll make reference to the previous resolution in the new resolution that the other one is rescinded. The previous resolution was awarded, rescinded, and we're awarding it to the new vendor at the price indicated.
so we don't need to rescind?
No, it will be incorporated by reference into that. So it will, we don't have to do. You don't have to do a separate standalone resolution. You can do it in one resolution, which makes reference that the reason why you're doing this new resolution is that it was terminated for convenience.
Okay. Any other questions?
I support this, but I just was wondering, so the contractor on the bathrooms does think that it could take a year for the new bathrooms in the...
No, we're actually expecting the project to be completed by February of this year, so mid-February of this year, which is ahead of schedule.
Okay.
I think when we originally had written the proposal, we had put in there a potential 6-month extension, just to kind of cover all the grounds.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to move this item forward?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business before finance?
Thank
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I would like to call to order the Public Safety Committee. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight, the first of which is the discussion, update on vehicle vandalism. Mr. Mudavern.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I asked for this item to be added to the agenda over the weekend because of what's happening over the last 2 weekends. There have been multiple vehicle vandalism in the city, in specific into area like Hamilton Hill and Mount Pleasant. And, it's like a pattern. Last Saturday, the previous Saturday. And I would like if Chief Clifford or Mayor can give us an update as what can we do or what action can we take to kind of like increase patrol in these areas and to kind of, push these perpetrators off and not to vandalize for the future. Go ahead, please.
Chairman, again, the police department an hour ago or a little bit more put out a press release summarizing some of that and asking for the public's assistance, put out some photographs and things to help identify the individuals. Depending on what questions you're going to look for would requested to be done in executive session because it's still a active, ongoing criminal investigation.
I think some of the question or the thing we asked by us, the residents, is what can the police do to help, push this off? People don't show up again next weekend again and start, vandalizing car. What action or what increased patrol, things like that. I don't think we just want to talk about, the arrests or, what is the investigation and things like that. It's more of an action kind of item. So increased patrol, be there, so people all the time.
Somebody helping identify those pictures will very quickly make sure it doesn't happen.
So in the press that went out today, it has image, it has.
Yes, there are images available.
Okay.
Would you like me to read you the press release? So we have
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll grab hold of it. But I just wanted to know, can you and your officers then increase patrol in those hotspot areas to kind of deter them from doing this again? Because it was like almost 100 vehicles.
Sure.
And a lot of expense. We're talking about $60,000 of expense. That's a lot, especially in a working class neighborhood where people are struggling and have to wake up in the morning trying to get to work, and here are 4 tires or 2 tires are slashed and they can't get to work. And not only get to work, but you're putting them in additional expense to do that.
Sure.
So they're asking us, what can we do to help? And that's why we're putting an agenda to ask. We need to do something to help them.
Sure, so I would say that the first thing that we can do is the public in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood, because that's primarily where these are, is to be extra vigilant with looking outside their windows if they hear a noise. If they hear kids walking down the street making loud noise, it could be these individuals. We don't know if they're juveniles or adults, but we suspect they're juveniles. We're just not sure what age they are. If they have cameras, call us. There's a tip line that's going to be put out with a press release. Call the tip line, let us know about it. Lock their car doors. Don't leave anything inside of them. A couple cars have been stolen, so lock their doors. If they have the ability to park off-street in their driveways where there's motion detecting lights, that would be very beneficial so that you're limiting your risk to having your tires vandalized. As far as what we're doing, we have our detective assigned to this case that works our 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. time frame. He's been consulting with our school resource officers, our probation department, every network that we have citywide that might be able to identify young individuals that we believe are doing this. And we also have increased patrols in those areas. So we spoke with the patrol chief this morning, and we will be having additional patrols, regular timed interval overnight throughout this week, so that we can make sure that we're out there. And as the mayor already indicated, we put some photos out that do have identifiable clothing. We'd like to know who these individuals are, so please give us a call if they have any idea. And we're looking to identify them and get restitution for the victims, if possible.
That's pretty good.
Oh, thank you. So is there a special number people should call? Should they, just a non-emergency number? What number should people call for this particular?
Our tips line is 518-788-6566. And then you can always call the dispatch, the non-emergency dispatch, which is 518. I'm drawing a blank. 630-0901. Too many numbers.
And your website's wonderful too for reporting a tip or a crime if you're on your computer. So
Yes.
yes.
Mr. Farley?
So, thank you, Chief. My question was, I don't necessarily want you to say anything that's going to tip the people off, so that they're aware of what this. I guess my question is there a certain time frame or that this is happening in, or is that? But only obviously answer that if you feel like that won't impede on your investigation. I was just wondering if there's a theme there.
In both instances, they've been the overnight hours.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
If you had a chance to look at the ring cameras, the videos, it's about 3-ish, 2-ish, around that time. Most of them, so not all of them, but some of them
I'm not
around
sure
that
if our
time.
press release released the times.
Because a lot of residents have been uploading the videos.
Right.
So if you get a chance, you can look at the videos and help. I encourage you to do that because that's how we are getting information and the calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because of what's going on, if they have any outdoor lights, leave them on overnight. The better the lighting, the better the cameras work. You know, they don't work great in the low light situations. But, you know, we have a lot of cameras in Mount Pleasant, you know. There's no doubt that we will be able to identify them. So with the public assistance, we'd rather do it sooner than later and find out what's going on with these individuals and get them stopped.
No, I appreciate the proactive approach you're taking and your department is taking because it's a serious concern out there to our residents.
Sure. We certainly understand that, and you know, Detective Quinones is the assigned detective, and he's been working on it for the last week. I want to make sure everybody is aware of that he has been working on it, he's been making progress. It's just, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to make an arrest yet.
One of the concerns that I told most of the residents who've been calling me is that they're asking that the police response time to them is like, you know, a couple hours out, but I can't, you know, notify them that they have to deal with so much of complaints, so much of calls for the very same thing, so they're working their way towards that. Is that a true statement to kind of continue to tell them?
Yeah, from a triage perspective, we always prioritize, you know, incidents that involve people over property, so that it's possible that, especially on a weekend, that may have happened.
So I did get some of this information, but 100 cars is missing?
I think it's upward of that towards that.
Wow, I didn't know it was that significant. I know there was a lot.
Yeah, we had 25 to 30 vehicles on the first night. And then approximately, I don't know if it says the second night. Yeah, so it could be close. I don't think it's nearly 100 yet, but it's
Might be 100 tires, I think.
Oh.
It's closer to
4 times per car.
60 vehicles.
Yeah.
30.
Chief, you mentioned about a stolen vehicle. Do you have like a number of count on that? Because I know the first Saturday, last Saturday and this Saturday, both they stole a vehicle. Is that correct?
correct. 2 stolen vehicles, both recovered and crashed and recovered. So of course, you know, there's some leads that'll follow those recovered vehicles too. Still working on that.
Ms. Porterfield?
And if people have videos, how can they get them to you?
So the best way to do it is just to call us and let us know that they have it, and then we'll walk them through the process. But there's an easy way that they can upload them to us. But we're going to want to speak to them and, you know, verify it's their video and all that. But we have an easy way that they can send them up to us via the internet.
But they should call first.
Yes.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
No, just thank you, Chief, and your officers for doing this.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a discussion to amend City Code Chapter 183, which is nuisance. If you can recall our conversation previously, it highlighted that the ongoing nature of just noise complaints throughout the city is definitely something that continues to affect the quality of life for a lot of our Schenectadians. In the special meeting that we had, the Commissioner Devine recommended adjusting our nuisance code specifically and improving or raising the value point threshold for noise from 3, and he didn't give us an actual number to change it to. However, my recommendation is increasing it to 6, which would be the maximum. I think that takes into consideration just the ongoing nature of just how destructive noise is to our residents. And although it would lower it from 3 or 4 instances to 2 to have to meet that 12-point threshold, I think it takes into consideration not every call is having one infraction. There might be multiple calls associated with each infraction. So I think it shows or presents a very aggressive response from the city, and that this is something that we do not want to continue to tolerate. And absolutely, we understand that individuals enjoying themselves in their parties or with their vehicles is definitely nothing we're trying to disrupt, but making sure we do that in a manner that is appropriate and not infringing on other people's personal space. So if there are any questions or comments, Mr. O'Brien?
Mr. Chairman, you've got in your packet you have a copy of the proposed ordinance, which, as the chairman indicated, increases the penalties from one category up to the sixth category. So a lot of that's adding it on and deleting, renumbering the paragraphs. And also the bottom portion of it is dealing with the actual fines, money portion. There's that's the current schedules. I didn't do anything to amend what the penalties are there for 250, 400, et cetera. The council wishes to, as part of its overall package, which wishes to increase those fine amounts. It can do so as part of the overall amendment of the ordinances.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, thank you. When we had initially discussed this, we had talked about the permit application fee. I know that I submitted some templates to the Corporation Council. Any updates?
We're working on it, but the current code allows for a permit process, and we have to develop the form. So we'll be in the process of developing that particular form for the sound permit. The code calls for it, but as far as the form has to be developed, and we're using the forms that you provided as the basis in which to create a simple form for folks to use.
Can we attach a timeline for it to get that out? Okay. 2 cycles from now?
Yes.
2 cycles. So we'll have the 2 cycles to kind of talk about the permit application.
The form.
The form.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Toro?
Yes, I appreciate the work you've done on this, Mr. Williams. You said your recommendation is 6 points. I'd like to know, just in reading through sexual performance by a child versus gambling offenses, they're all 6 points. I would think that some would be a little higher, and this is your personal recommendation. Can we have maybe the commissioner come back in and give us his recommendation? I'd like to see some of these things a higher point, a 6, and then some a little lower. I'm not sure.
So what is your recommendation?
Well, I guess my issue would be 6 points for offenses involving marijuana. So would that just be smoking it on the street, or 6 points, since it's kind of legal, and we're selling it at dispensaries and things. So should that be 6 points versus, other things that are on here that may be, especially, a little bit more unlawfully dealing with a child, different things like that. So
Sorry,
just, yes, if you understand what I'm saying, I'm in favor of this. I just wondered, these are your recommendations, if we could get some,
I would say with
commissioners.
respect to the noise, it is. If there are other items that are other individuals like to address, absolutely. But I would say for me, it was specifically highlighting on noise and focusing on adjusting that one issue. I think oftentimes when we do expand our scope, sometimes we lengthen the timelines. And I think this has been an issue that's been ongoing for years since I've been on the council. So I think wanting to just remain with addressing this one area, but if you'd like to expand that, absolutely. I would just want to make sure that did not delay our response in total. I think that's important. Mr. O'Brien?
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, you can move forward with calling for a public hearing on amending this portion of the noise, and then always revisit whatever portions of those various those other categories as points. So you can do it as a standalone rather than doing them all at one time. So that's your option. So you can go back and revisit those other sections.
Thank you.
Ms. Patrick?
No, I just was nodding in agreement with that.
Understood. Mr. Moonrain?
Yeah, so section 2 is saying that the following violation is going to generate 6 points. And if you go under section 3, that will say these offenses generating 3 points. So there is a comparison there. Certain offenses, a high level one versus some of them are low level one. So I kind of think it's a good step. And I agree with the corporation, let's move forward with calling for the public hearing. Let's look at this here, but we need to move forward because we have been discussing this way into last year, and we need to move in because next couple of months will be summer again. we need to do something about it because you go across the city and you hear complaining about loud music, exhaust and all these things are happening. Loud music from cars, so we need to act. So it's a good working document.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, just probably because I agree with what Mr. McMahon was saying as far as like addressing this now before weather breaks and we have more people outside, more people having events, things of that nature. And I would just, kind of also like to amplify the fact that this, again, that there's an educational component to this as well. So as we're making these changes, we're just, letting people know that, that we are taking a more assertive stance on this. Therefore, I think that some of that work can be preventative. So I think that that's an important part that I just didn't want to lose in the conversation.
Mr. Rivera?
And that will factor in the permit application process, so that if someone has an event, they can come and apply for a permit, so we know all the details, who is promoting this event, and the approval process, the contact information, so the police can directly contact them. They don't need to go show up on the property. They can call them and let them know, we're receiving complaint. Your permit is 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, you need to shut down. We don't need to come over there. They can do that in-house. So that permit process will help with this also.
And I would say last comments, I know a lot of people within the city say, well, I call the non-emergency number and I don't necessarily see a response. In this case, this will help build the justification on the back end for Corporation Counsel to proceed with legal action. So if you are experiencing these types of noise issues in your immediate area, please document it by calling the non-emergency number. And that will help us understand how many times, and that'll fuel into this nuisance adjustment moving forward. Mr. Toro?
Thank you. So, again, you can get a permit to make noise from noon to 6 when your neighbors, whatever, I'm sure we're going to work that out. But I'd also like to ask Chief Clifford maybe if he can come forward to maybe address just a little bit about the new ticketing system that you have, which will make your officers and patrolmen easier to ticket when these instances come up like right away, and how that's moving along with the department and getting to the courts.
So city court ordinances, the way that we enforce that is we process it the same as we would do an arrest. So the old way was we'd have to go and take a person into custody literally, which may or may not involve handcuffs. We have to write an incident report, and then we have to complete a master name on the individual, go back to the police station, jump on a computer, write an accusatory instrument, file that paperwork with the desk sergeant, book that person, and then release them on an appearance ticket. That was the old way. We've now streamlined that process to make it more like receiving a traffic ticket, where right there on the spot we can do all the paperwork, issue a person an appearance ticket on the spot, go back. The desk sergeant would still have to book the person, but there's a lot less paperwork, and that means that we can make the arrest a lot faster, more efficient, while accomplishing the same goal. So that what that does is that encourages our officers to make that arrest, so that we hold the people accountable. A lot of the hesitations in the past, which led to advisements, is that it's a Saturday night, we're low on staffing, the call volume is up, and officers just didn't want to get bogged down for 45 minutes making a loud music arrest when they know that we have other more important calls. I should say not more important, but more violent calls coming in, calls that really needed their attention were coming in, and they didn't want to get tied up on them. So we've been able to implement that process. We had a few hiccups with the court system, and we finally worked it out with all the judges to make sure that they're all okay with it. We tested the process this year, specifically in the summertime. It worked well, so we've implemented that, and we're starting to utilize that more often now.
Thank you. Mr. Farley?
Yeah, so Chief, I remember in the conversations, some of the conversation was around like how do we distinguishing or measuring kind of like that noise, like the volume and like how it's going. And my question is to you is that, is there anything that you need, further from us as city council to for you to be able to enforce that? Like, because I don't know, do we have the right type of instruments or to make that distinction between, okay, you were just being allowed, but now you're kind of over this thing? Or do you need anything from us, anything further from us to support that?
Right now, I don't believe we do. That might change in the future as we test this process and they go more through the courts. If the judges require some kind of instrument reading, then we might. But as of right now, I'm not aware of it. If an officer shows up and they feel that it's unreasonable noise, they can make the arrest.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivera?
Chief, is this the same ticket process we had passed through City Council several years ago? And you had some problem with it, the officers there, and they were thrown out by the court. And it was pushed back to Corporation Council for them to revisit the tickets.
Yes.
So that was done, a revision done by Corporation Council?
Yes.
The ticket that you're rolling out now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And you had discussion with the court system to make sure that we're not going to have another sort of problem?
Correct. Yeah, we had to change the form, so that's all on the front page. So
Nothing on the second page?
Correct. Yeah.
That was the problem.
That was the problem.
With the second page constitute another incident. So instead of one incident, it was two incidents, and it was not recorded properly, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. The judge wanted it, wanted the originals, and by putting it on the back, that wasn't sufficient, so we made photocopies. And so the judge we complied with what the judge was asking for, and then we tested the process, and it's been working fine.
So when we had passed that ticket, I'm trying to recollect back a couple of years ago in the city council here, it was more not for noise, it was more of a general purpose. You can go there and cite for litter, things like that. Is it the same?
It's the same, yep.
The same.
Yeah, we actually, on the ticket itself, it has multiple city court ordinance violations that are, probably the ones that are, that people mostly complain about that are on there. But we also have a last spot that we could put anyone in there that we wanted to, so that we could just, like an other, where we could write it in there.
Is it possible we can share that template to the council? So
Sure.
we look at that, the revised ticket,
Yep.
that violation. Because
Yeah.
it's good. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a couple of years in the works when we passed it originally, and then we had some pushback from the court system. And I'm glad that you're working with Corporation Council to move forward, because it was a big quality of life issue back then, and we move forward with that. I think it's going to be well received out there and kind of make a difference in our city.
Yes.
Yes.
So people don't now get any warning at this point in time? So if somebody gets if there's a loud noise, call your officer, show up. Before it was like turn the noise down so we don't have to come back, etc. So now, is that no longer happening?
There's no guaranteed one warning.
Okay.
There's a lot of misconception out there that you got a first one for free. There was a warning, and that's not the case. It always comes down to discretion of the officer and the condition of what they walk into.
Okay.
And they'll look at the premise history and see if they've been spoken to before. It always comes down to the situation, and they're not out there looking to write tickets, for any reason other than enforcement. And if they feel that they can get the mission accomplished by speaking to the person, then they do it. If they feel like this needs to be sent before the judge, then they'll write the ticket and ask them to go and speak to the judge about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I remember part of the discussion, Assistant Chief Antonovich spoke about when an officer responds, then you have your changeover, making sure that communication is transferred over to the next shift. But I think in a similar fashion to the response with vehicle vandalism, I think there were a lot of trigger words back in the day where you hear community policing. It's important to recognize that putting all of the onus on to law enforcement might not be the best and most appropriate way forward. So it's working collaboratively with the community to make sure that this is received well and that we're also doing our actions on our part. If there were no other questions.
One more question. In terms of timeline for an officer to complete that process, I know back in then it was passed with like 45 minutes. Do you have like a timeline to that now if you were to go there and write that ticket? How much of a time would it take?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that the old way, it was definitely 45 minutes, probably somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, and now it's probably more like 20 to 30 minutes. So it's I would say cut in half.
Nice.
So thank you, Chief. If there are no other questions or comments, Mr. Warren.
Mr. Chairman, I just, Section 4, increase of penalties. Do you wish to increase penalties since you're going for the, calling for a public hearing on increasing the point system? Do you wish to double the range that's already in there from a minimum of 250 to the second offense from 250 to 400? Or are you at this point okay with the penalty fine phase at this point? You just want to increase the points system for the nuisance?
I would say for me personally, just wanting to ensure the process works ethically. So I think at this point, it's just making sure the points actually reflect the degree of disruption to the community. So I am safe with leaving the fines as is.
Okay.
But I'm only one of the members in the committee. Anyone else?
I would agree that we should leave fines as is, but we'll increase the points.
Okay.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I think that was discussed when we discussed this last year in terms of fine. General consensus was to keep it as is.
So hearing no other questions or comments, may I have a motion to, does need to be two
Call
parts.
for a public hearing for the amendment of the ordinance increasing the points for noise.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And the last item is a reminder, amending the certain sections of the Schenectady City Code, Chapter 248, regarding setting a citywide speed limit at 25 miles per hour. There is a public hearing that will be on January 13th. Ms. Patrick, did you have any other?
No, we just wanted to remind folks about the January 13th public hearing. And again, reinforce the idea that we're proposing this as a safety feature, and we'll see how it goes.
If there are no other items to befall public safety, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
I'd like to call to order government operations. We have one item on the agenda. That is to review the chapter 28 of the City Council of President Porterfield.
Thank you. So this, well, as we all know, that Chapter 28 governs how the City Council works. And this is coming before you because for our last special meeting, there was some question about whether or not the notification was proper in terms of our special meeting. So in particular, that it was delivered via email and that was considered personal delivery. So based on the recommendation from Corporation Counsel, it seemed the best course of action to actually include that specifically in the code to make sure that was no longer a question. So what's coming before you tonight is actually to amend Section 28-3 regarding special meetings, and that email be accepted as a notice of delivery. I will say that there were other questions that came up regarding the entire chapter, which everyone has printed out for you. And in particular, one of them was Mr. O'Brien has given us copies of the amount of time required for notice. So at this point in time, it's 3 days. There was a question whether it needed to be 3 days, and he provided us the Second City's class laws, which says it can be at least 24 hours. And so really opening that discussion up whether we're, first of all, to amend regarding the email notification, and secondly, whether we want to change the length of time that the notice is required to be out in front. And let me just add one other one that I looked at that no longer really even makes any sense, actually, is 28-31, smoking in council chambers, because you can't smoke indoors anywhere. So we could just lose that one. So it's opening up for discussion on these items.
I just have a suggestion. In terms of us saying by email, can we use the word electronic delivery? I'm looking at this one. Yeah. Electronic transmittal. Is this proposed resolution draft. Yeah, so I'm suggesting to take the electronic transmitter here and replace it by email.
Or
So
vice
that way
versa.
we're covering all the bases in terms of like, we do have emails, we can do by text or any other forms of electronic
The mayor
correspondence.
has.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, I would question that, how do you verify people are getting the proper notification? And my preference for the wording would be for this official city email address. Because you say email addresses, people have multiple ones, they have business ones, they have some that are active, have some that are inactive. And you're going to get the fact pattern where, again, it becomes a question of whether or not people were properly notified.
President Porfield?
I have the same concern saying electronic. That means that you could text it to someone, and none of us are given, none of us have phones that are given to us by the government. We're using our own personal phones, so if something should come up, then and they need to look at our text messages, etc., that means you're turning over your own personal phone. So I would agree that email and government email, I haven't thought about narrowing it down to that, is probably the best way to do it, because I guess electronic also was indicated that it meant that by fax, that people said fax, but that is electronic delivery. So I support using the government email, but I would caution against us just opening it to electronic delivery, especially given the fact that we don't have phones that are given to us for work purposes.
Any other questions, comments on that? Mr. Williams?
So thank you for bringing this forward. I did have a chance to read the chapter in its entirety, and I think as we get to section 28-14, there tends to be a lot of certain pronouns, and I thought it would be important to have some gender neutral language. As glad to see that there have been a lot of progressive steps taken since 1989.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And I guess I would just echo the fact that as we're reviewing anything in the city code, we want to make sure that we're using our current lens of today. So I think that would just be a best practice moving forward. We need to have like home pigeons on there and leave it for those. So I think we'll do that. Any other questions or thoughts on this? So are we talking about amending this right now, or just?
No.
No, well, we couldn't, because this is just essentially
Just a
to review it and to bring up what people are bringing up, the gender, using the government email.
Sure.
And what I'd like to see is for us to provide the feedback from today's meeting, and then to bring it back in 2 weeks, to provide it to Mr. O'Brien, and then to bring it back for us to review the changes that people are bringing forward.
Mr. McGurran?
Can we just go ahead and call for a public hearing in the meantime? Because we have to amend the city charter, and at the same time, we're just flushing out information, because I don't think it's a lot of information needed to amend this section. It's more of a few changes
I'm
in
fine.
language.
I mean, I'm certainly fine with that. I just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to give their input.
Yeah, I'm fine to move, what we call for a public hearing to amend this section.
Mr. Chairman, as the council president said, that this is an opportunity for you all to review the chapter 28, see what other things need to be amended, call for the public hearing. I guess that would be on January 27th, and that will give another committee cycle, and then to go through 28 and then do the final resolutions and get that out prior to the public hearing, so all those changes can be made at one time rather than just doing each here and there.
Right.
Okay. All right, so I'll accept the motion for a public hearing.
So,
Second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
I have nothing else to come before government operations. So the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. We are adjourned. All those in favor?
Thank you. I'd like to call to order City Development and Planning. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first item is recommendation to the City Council from the Planning Commission regarding draft cannabis dispensary zoning legislation. Ms. Barash.
Madam Chair, I'll take
Mr.
this
O'Brien.
question. I also have Mr. Connolly from the Planning Department here also to give out maps of the districts and as well as to explain what some of the districts are. And while he's doing that, just a bit of a refresh everybody's recollection. This was last before you last month. Referral was made to the City Planning Commission pursuant to the Schenectady City Code for their review and input. They reviewed it and then they have submitted their recommendation to you regarding this. The moratorium is still in effect, however, it expires next month, it's February 11th. So with the cycle that they are and the time that it is, you're going to have to call for that public hearing for January 27th on the draft. And then pursuant to Article 12B, the general municipal law, the amendment of a zoning code that hits on the borders of other municipalities has to be referred to the county planning department because this is citywide, so these districts obviously are hitting the boundaries of all the neighboring communities. So pursuant to Article 12B of the general municipal law, just as you recall from back in the spring of last year, we had to do a referral up to the county planning department for the vape ordinance for their comment and review and comment. Same thing here. They have up to 30 days. So you can see how time is now moving along here. So the 2 asks, before we get into the details here, the 2 asks added for this committee and for the council for the next cycle are 1, calling for that public hearing on the draft on the 27th of January, and 2, a transmittal resolution of the draft up to county planning for their review and comment. So those are the asks, the immediate asks that are before you to move the process along. Regarding the proposed ordinance is that the cannabis establishments, which include retail dispensaries, as well as on-site consumption and retail dispensaries and micro businesses with a retail portion, that's the kind of aspect that brings them into our code here. Cannabis establishments is defined above and it's in the code that is highlighted for you. Those definitions are before you. Are going to be limited to, as we discussed before, the M1, the industrial districts, M2, C4, and C5 zone districts, and C2 and C3 zone districts subject to the special use permit. And Mr. Conley will tell you about the special use permit. And then, so at this point, I'll turn it over to him regarding the maps and as well as to explain those districts and giving examples of those districts.
Thank you. So what the map is showing, the map is showing schools and churches as provided by our assessment office, as the legislation is going to prohibit any new dispensaries or on-site consumption spots within 500 feet of those. So all those dots, whether they be in residential zones or not, no establishments going forward could be within 500 feet of those locations. And vice versa, if there is a new dispensary or on-site consumption spot that comes in, a new school, church, so on and so forth, could not operate in those areas without getting approval from the zoning board to allow for those uses as, dispensaries and on-site consumption establishments have been deemed by the state and the Office of Cannabis Management as locations that are not fit for these locations, around youth, minors, so on and so forth. The Planning Commission's recommendation was to have it have, their main change from Mr. O'Brien's original legislation was to have on-site consumption spots via special use permit only, as that gives them essentially more authority to protect the residential interests. General site plan approval, well, if it's just permitted as of right, they don't necessarily have the authority to look at issues such as nuisances, if there's any fumes from, smoking outside, whatever it may be. They don't, if it was permitted as of right, that wouldn't be aspects that they were able to look at. Having the special use permit gives them the opportunity to do so, and although the Office of Cannabis Management has the authority to issue on-site consumption licenses, they have not rolled any out yet. So we don't know what these on-site consumption spots are going to look at, and the Planning Commission made the recommendation to be more proactive with their zoning, and if the time comes when these establishments are rolled out and they're relatively unobtrusive to neighborhoods and residences, then we can roll back a little bit. But the intent was to be proactive instead of reactive, and give them the most authority possible to protect the interests of the residential neighborhoods that might be adjacent to our commercial corridors.
Madam President?
Yes.
I would just ask Mr. Connolly to tell us about M1, M2, C4, and C5. What are those districts? And, give us examples for those districts.
Yeah, so M1 and M2 are strictly industrial and warehousing. No residential is allowed. No single family, multifamily, nothing of that sort. As you can see in the second half of their Technology Drive is an example of a heavily industrial corridor. The lower Broadway and Grand Street areas as well off of Broadway, industrial. There aren't many of these M1 and M2 corridors, but their express purpose is to have the uses that aren't fit to be around the residential neighborhoods. So we thought it would be appropriate to have it as of right in those areas. C5 is the least restrictive commercial corridor. It's essentially the closest commercial corridors that we have to these industrial districts. So while it's closer and more adjacent to residential neighborhoods, there aren't very many of them, and we generally allow higher leniency in terms of the impact that the businesses may have. So, for example, Upper State Street past Crosstown Plaza is one of our C5 business districts. Crosstown Plaza itself, C5. The section of Duane Avenue, if you're familiar with the big storage warehouse off of 890 over by Odell Street, these are just to give you a brief overview of some of our C5 districts. Commercial, but not necessarily in the same regard as a C2 district like Broadway and Bellevue or Van Vranken in the north side, which are commercial in nature but are much more residentially oriented than some of these C5 districts. And then C4 is our downtown, which is intended to be, very commercial in nature. We have, or should I say, New York State, the OCM has legislation in place to restrict how many establishments can be in proximity to each other. I believe we can't have any dispensaries within 1,000 feet of one another. So even though the downtown district is very residential in some aspects, that prohibits sort of an over-congestion of dispensaries in that area.
Madam Chair, regarding the special use permit for, what are the criteria, what's the planning board mandated to look at? What are the things that the planning board has to look at if the applicant has to go before and get a special use permit?
It's going to look at, it looks at the impact, the more holistic, so to speak, impact that it might have on the residences. If a general site plan approval, we look at purely code. Is this curb cut legal? Is the sidewalk up to code? So on and so forth. This is going to look at how traffic patterns might be impacted as a result of this. We were talking earlier about the noise pollution that's been happening throughout the city that gives us a greater authority to analyze that. For example, something that's already issuance to a special use permit is drive-throughs in most areas. The reason being is because of the pretty significant traffic impact that can have on commercial areas that might be next to residential corridors. So it gives us an expanded area to view those impacts and how it might impact the day-to-day lives that we wouldn't have if, for example, a more mundane use that could be allowed in those districts. If that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. O'Brien, so the current existing locations for cannabis, they will not be impacted by this?
That's correct. They'll be grandfathered in. In other words, there'll be a legal non-conforming use as long as they remain in that particular business. The minute they move out, and if a cannabis establishment does not move in, then they lose their legal non-conforming use. So those entities that are where they are right now, that may not have fit into this category, will stay there until such time they're no longer in business.
Right. And for those, there's some that haven't opened yet, but they've chosen their location, which is outside of what we're currently discussing, that this doesn't impact anything that's already in the pipeline?
Anything that was already in the pipeline wouldn't have been impacted. They would have been grandfathered in as pursuant to the moratorium that you all put in place back in November, I think. And if they had put their applications in, then they were grandfathered in as well. And I know that 2 of them also had to go through special use permits. The ones that were already in the process also went through the special use permit process and approval by the planning board. And that there was only one outstanding.
There's one outstanding. It still needs to get a special use permit as well. That is for a drive-through. It's not a special use permit to allow the uses. It's 2 of the locations wanted drive-throughs for their establishments.
Wow.
That's why they need the special use.
Drive-throughs are, I know that drive-throughs are allowed by the Office of Cannabis Management.
Are they?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Farley, then Ms.
Sure. I was just curious as to like, is this kind of similar to like what we look at when people are like maybe trying to open up a bar or a pub or something like that? Is there any kind of consistency in how we view that?
For the time being, no. In terms of on-site consumptions, for the comparison for consumption to consumption.
No. Just
right now,
process,
right now it's a little bit more restrictive. The reason is for 2 reasons. First of all, OCM has restriction guidelines in terms of distances that are not in place for bars. And secondly, as I mentioned, we don't have any guidelines on how on-site consumption spots are going to look yet. So if it turns out to be an instance where maybe it's only THC-infused seltzers or gummies or things of that sort where there's no smoking allowed, maybe we could roll back some of the restrictions. We could analyze it as those licenses come out. But we don't know if that's going to be the case yet. We don't know if it's going to have outdoor smoking patios or whatever it might be. We just don't know. So that's why we did it the way we did.
I guess I was thinking along the lines of like the churches and schools, like the proximity to church and schools, as far as like what our. So if somebody wants to open up a pub next to a school or something like that, we don't have anything this wouldn't be anything that closely mirrors how that.
Not on the local level.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if there's any states.
The state liquor authority keeps those distances as far as, and a lot of the distance you see here are based on state law, the 200 feet, the 500 feet to a school, that's pursuant to state law.
From state office.
That was something that was discussed at the planning commission meeting. They wanted to, in some instances, expand those to make it different. Mr. O'Brien advised us that we couldn't alter it one way or the other just because we had to comply with the state guidelines.
Mr. Toro.
Thank you. How many applications are still pending that would be grandfathered in?
Just one. There's one.
There's only one.
Only one outstanding. We had 2 at the last meeting. We have one outstanding one on Eastern Parkway they want to go into the old Key Bank.
Right.
Across from the Family Dollar over there. That's the only outstanding one that's left on our agenda.
On your agenda, okay. How many dispensaries are open in the city, or how many with that one pending would there be?
8 or 9 or so. We have one on Upper Union,
Yeah,
3 or 4 downtown, one in the Harbor
I knew
Center,
there were a
Green
lot
Street.
in queue, kind of.
Yeah.
I got applications coming in, so.
There were 3 that got in right before the moratorium. 2 of them have passed along. One of them has not provided all the sufficient application materials necessary, so they're still in
So
queue.
kind of this is it, really. Have there
Yeah.
been any more that have come in?
No, not since the moratorium's been in place, no.
Well, just to clarify, this is it for within, that's not going to be relegated to the areas that we're talking about. They could still be within the city. It's just like M1, M2, and then
No, I
special
understand.
uses.
I wondered if there were any pending applications. No.
The only one that, I mean, the one on Eastern Parkway would not fit in with this legislation. That's the only last one that would be grandfathered in. And as Mr. O'Brien said, if the one on Eastern Parkway opens and then has a change in ownership, or same goes for the one on Upper Union Street, those would then be subject to these regulations, and the process would be different going forward.
So let me there was another one on Eastern Parkway, like almost across the street. Did that one not get through the process?
This is the same owners.
So they
So
just wanna
that
move.
Family Dollar location didn't work for a myriad of reasons, so they purchased the lot across the street.
Oh, okay, okay. Interesting. And this question actually probably is for you, Mr. O'Brien. So there is within the state guidelines no limit of the number that we can have within a municipality?
Right, we can't cap it.
Okay. Wow. Well, if we can't, we can't, but, geez, we talked about that. I mean, there could just be a number. So I think, based on what we're doing, it's probably the best way to go. At least we can limit where they are if we can't cap the number within our municipality. So at this point in time, those are recommendations. And Mr. O'Brien, I'm sorry, were there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Right. So, Mr. O'Brien, so are you saying that we need to both call for a public hearing and also pass, that we're going to transmit it to county planning?
Yes, Madam President. Yes, two resolutions to pass. One calling for the public hearing on the 27th on the draft, and the draft going up to county planning for its review and comment.
Right. Mr. Mancini, did you have a question?
Would this apply to any site that want to cultivate cannabis?
Well, the cultivate is, the micro business has to have a retail aspect to it. And then, if a micro business is for an analogy, is like a microbrewery. In other words, they develop their own product, they grow their own product and then sell it. So they have to have a retail aspect, and that's what this is looking at, is retail. And as indicated, everything is going to require a special use permit, whatever cannabis establishment in the C2 and C3 districts. And the on-site consumption, as Mr. Howley has indicated, is that regardless of zone, is going to require a special use permit. Because you would ask the regulators, the applicants, and us, this is a developing area of the law. And that's, we're all going through this. So if you ask any of them, any of the actors, the regulators, the local municipalities, the applicants, it's a developing area of the law, and I think that recognizes that fact, giving local control, but also allowing these, but also taking in consideration how they fit in.
Right. And so, just to follow up, because you and I had already discussed this about the micro businesses.
Right.
And you have to have we know that you already have to have an establishment. But my concern was that if you had an establishment, where could you actually, what is the distance? Does it have to be 25 miles outside the city? Is it within 25 miles of their business? What is it?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's with 25 miles. If they have one in here, within that 25-mile radius, their cultivation part of the operation has to be within that 25-mile radius of where they're located for the retail operation.
And they would have to have a special permit for the cultivation?
In those C2 or C3, now, regarding the cultivation aspect, that has, whole separate requirements as far as, how many square feet, et cetera. So you could ask for a special use for the cultivation aspects of it, for example. Cultivation aspects only, not the retail aspects.
Right.
So cultivation aspects because that's a whole different aspect. It's not a retail, it's not,
Right.
it's a cultivation.
Yeah. Well, for the sake of the council, I think that may be something we want to consider for a special permit for a cultivation aspect, because based on what I'm understanding is that conceivably, if you have a large enough property within the city, you could use it for cultivation if you already own an establishment.
I don't know how long the large, Jack, do you know?
I don't know exactly the specifications for the lot size that would be required for this, but you couldn't just put it anywhere. You know, it would still need to be commercially zoned, and it would still be subject. You know, if it was M1, M2, C4, or and C5, C4 would probably not fit into that, just because generally speaking, the lot sizes are smaller. M1, M2, C5 have been determined that those would be more suitable for it, as they're more commercial, more business oriented. If it was that case, C2, C3 would be, as we said before, special use permit, and it wouldn't apply to any residential zones at all.
So, Mr. O'Brien, if you could just provide us with the information about the cultivation part of it. I know that we're going to move ahead with
What we can do, just move things forward
Sure.
here, is just, we change that one aspect where it requires a special use permit for the on-site consumption, and just say micro-business, the cultivation aspects, not the retail, but the cultivation aspects of a micro-business will require a special use permit.
Yes, I think that would make it at least there
Yeah.
would be some say and have to come before the planning
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah. We can do that. I can, I'll mark that up,
Okay.
add that into that one section down there, and then you can go forward with the resolutions, and you'll have the final draft for next week anyhow, because it has to be transmitted up to the county. So I'm going to add that language.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this? Okay, so our next item is to actually call for a public hearing regarding the zoning ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
And also additionally, we need to have a motion to transmit to county planning.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Is there anything else to come before city development and planning? If not, ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the Claims Committee. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. 3 of these will need to be discussed in executive session. And no motion to enter executive session. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are in executive session. Members of the public will have to